Hello everyone, it's been a couple of days since I made a video. I've been very busy in other things, but I'm happy to be back. We're going to talk about the classical Pirc defense, some simple plans from the white side. Later on, perhaps in some other videos, we'll address the black side, but we're going to show you a few simple plans in the classical variation. My last video, I looked at the Austrian attack from the white side and explained White's plan there. Now I'm going to show you a plan or a few plans from the white side using the classical system. So this first game we're going to look at is from 1984 from Efim Geller with the white pieces versus Josef Pribble with the black pieces. So the game started off e4, d6. So there's your Pirc, d4, knight f6, knight c3, g6, and knight f3. This denotes the classical variation, right? Nothing fancy about white setup. No raging attack with f4 or any attempts to try to blow black off the board. So what white is saying here is that okay, I'm just going to take my space in the center and develop my pieces. I'm not going to try to get greedy. I'm not going to try to blow you off the board, but I'm going to take this space advantage in the beginning of the game, this small advantage, and I'm just going to utilize this space advantage to slowly improve my position and argue that you should have never given up the space in the first place. So usually these games are typically longer because they're not as combative. All right. White usually will play for just like a long-term grind in a position. But as you will see from these games, it is possible for black to get short-circuited if he's not careful. So let's look. Bishop g7, bishop e2, castle, castles. So each side is developing freely. It's just that white has a space advantage and pawn preponderance in the center right now. Bishop g4, bishop e3, protecting the d4 pawn, and also preparing queen d2 and connecting the rooks. Knight c6, queen d2, rook e8, rook fe1, a6. So now black reveals his intentions to perhaps attack on the queen side. Rook a d1. So look at this simple setup by white. So this is like plan number one, this basic classical setup here. All right. So once you get this setup and black plays e5, which he's allowed to do here, you simply exchange pawns. D takes, D takes. Okay, and avoid the exchange of queens here as Geller does. So queen c1, and the rook is revealed on d1 and attacking the queen. So queen e7, and now here is the crux of the plan right here. After queen e7, notice the queen is in kind of a precarious position here, and Geller jumps on this opportunity to attack with d5. Knight d5 rather. So although the e pawn is unprotected, the queen is attacked, so black doesn't have time to grab this pawn. So he plays knight takes d5, and now e takes d5. And notice now white has a 4-3 pawn majority on the queen side. Drives the knight back, c4, and the majority starts pushing immediately. So you can see the battle lines are drawn here, where you have black going for a king side attack and white going for his queen side attack with a majority. f4, c5, and now knight f7. Perhaps e4 here, just continuing to press on with the attack. Knight f7, d6, and this is a nice tactical shot by Geller here. After c takes d6, c takes d6, knight takes d6 would be meant by a pin here, bishop c5, which is kind of unhealthy for black here. If he tries to hold on with rook a d8, then just simply bishop c4, check king h8, and then rook d6. And after rook d6, notice he's still in the pin. So this allows white to threaten knight g5, check, knight f7 check rather. So rook f8, and then knight f7 can be played here. Rook takes and bishop takes. Or you can do an in-between move like h3 here, attacking the knight also. So after c takes d6, you have a dangerous pawn that's passed on d6. Queen d7 is played. This is not really good to blockade with the queen, but the queen had to move anyway, so Pirc uses it as a blockading piece. But the best blockading piece is definitely the knight. So queen c7, offering a trade of queens, of course, and of course this would help push the pawn forward. All right, and this would definitely be bad for black, as black would eventually, can protect his pawn easily with the move like bishop b6. Instead, rook a d8 was played. Bishop c4, pinning the knight here. h6. And now another nice tactical shot by Geller. Bishop g5, hitting the rook. And the idea here is, and also notice the knight is pinned by the bishop on c4. So the idea here is h takes g5, then knight takes g5 with the double attack here on the knight. And if rook f8, rook f8, then just simply f3, bishop h5, and now bishop e6 is really strong. If queen takes c7, then just simply d takes c7. And then if rook c8, for instance, just rook d7 with all of this pressure on f7. So after bishop c4, h6, bishop g5, black played queen takes c7, d takes c7, rook d1, f4, h3, bishop c8, and after knight h4, Pirc resigned. Again, h takes g5 is no good here because of simply rook d8, again exploiting the pin of this knight here. So we saw a simple setup by white in this classical system. Right, this is easy enough to remember. And then we saw a very simple plan after after black achieved his e5 in the position. Just simply d takes e5, d takes e5, avoiding the change of queens, and then exploiting the d5 square here, creating a majority on the queen side and using that to his advantage. This next game is between Grandmaster Anthony Costin and with the white pieces, and Kurt Hansen with the black pieces. And this game is from 1988. And the main idea in this game is good to study so that you can learn how to play when positions are symmetrical. The general idea when you have like a position that is symmetrical or almost symmetrical is that it's very important to try to get an initiative. Usually whoever gets the initiative in those symmetrical positions can have the upper hand because you're always 1 or 2 steps ahead of the opponent, meaning that you can attack first. And this often gives you an upper hand when everything else on the board is pretty much the same. And this is one of the reasons why the classical Pirc is so effective, is because the positions often will become similar, but since since black had to take so much time in organizing his break, to play e5, usually he's slightly behind because in development, because white had more space in the beginning. So white is usually ready to strike first, although black is able to create it, eventually make his e5 break and create a symmetrical looking position. Usually white is able, if he plays correctly, to orchestrate his strike first. So we'll see that in this game. So again, Pirc d5, d4, knight f6, knight c3, g6, knight f3, bishop g7, bishop e3. Same setup, castle. Here we see a deviation in h3 instead of bishop e2, for example. Knight c6, there's bishop e2, e5, and again h3 just kind of restricts black a little bit. So it does seem like a waste of time, but at the end of the day, black doesn't, his lack of space doesn't allow him a meaningful place to put his bishop. So he winds up in essence giving the time back in order to find a spot for the bishop. So there's e5. So black is able to get in this e5 because white has taken extra time to play moves like h3. So it's a trade-off, but this is of course part of his plan. Now here he plays d takes e5. Of course he can play d5 and you can go into a different type of game where you're preparing to attack on the queen side. However, he decides to just simply take, d takes, knight takes, knight takes, and now you have this symmetrical position I was talking about. Now, unlike in the last game, Costin doesn't avoid the trade of queens at all. He doesn't. He's not worried about it. What he's trying to do in this symmetrical looking position is gain an advantage. And of course, this position is not perfectly symmetrical. Black has a fianchetto, but I'm talking about mainly this e4, e5 pawn setup, and also the pawns on the queen side, right? But notice how white has this, slightly better piece placement in the center. c6. So black is trying to make sure d5 is, safe. a4. So that prevents b5 in the future. Queen e7. Castles b6. Okay, queen e3. I'm sorry, queen f3 rather. Queen b4. Bishop b3. And now finally, black decides to play bishop e6, which is, he finds something to do with his bishop, but it's kind of risky because, he damages his pawn structure, right? This could be risky in the long term. But as long as he can defend it adequately, it's not a big deal, is it? So queen e2. So this idea is interesting because the bishop trade opens up the f file for the rook, and since the queen was on f3, the queen felt compelled to move out of the way. All right. So rook a d8 is played. If knight takes e4, then it's a trap here because queen g4, and you can see the knight here being attacked twice, and then the queen is hanging. So there's too many hanging pieces for black to grab that pawn. So instead he plays rook a d8, good move, and now rook a3. Again, white sets another trap. All right, and it's funny, this position looks like there wouldn't be too much there. It's another trap. This time it's queen takes b2 and then rook b3. So rook a3 and just simply knight e8 here. Now, black's idea is to transfer this knight here to d6 and then possibly even come to c4. However, this allows again white to develop an initiative here. So he plays a5. So while the knight is temporarily breaking coordination between rooks, a5 is played, and now there's an attack here. White is simply threatening to play a takes b6, followed by the rook to the 7th rank. If b5, the a7 pawn is on prise. If b takes a5, rook b3, again this allows penetration to the 7th rank, right? And if black is able to somehow thwart that, he just becomes slightly uncoordinated. And this is like just a sample line, and he winds up dropping the pawn eventually anyway. And you can see black's queenside pawns are scattered. So black, choosing the lesser of evils, chose to bypass with b5 and just simply give up this pawn. So it's not like he missed the pawn, but the pressure in the position from that move a5 caused black to do that. So bishop takes h7, a7, excuse me, just a pawn up, bishop h6, rook d1, knight takes, knight d6, and now rook d3. And finally he gets the knight, he gets the c4, but at the cost of a pawn here again. To take this pawn here, knight takes e4. This time black can just simply play a move like a6, if he wants to. Okay, or he can play bishop b6, protecting the pawn at first. So rook d3, knight c4, and he just plays a6. Again, the queen, if queen takes, then the bishop comes back to c5. So it wouldn't be just rook takes d6 and then queen takes a7. Nope, the bishop would come with the double attack on this knight here. And of course you can see the rook is behind that. So knight c4, and now the pawn is attacked. So a6, rook a8. There's a penetration to the 7th rank. Queen f8, b3, kicking the knight out. Queen c8, and now queen d3. Queen takes a6, so it gets the pawn back, but at a great price, and the price is the game. So he resigned after rook d8. The reason why is because after rook d8, the simply queen takes d8, king f7, queen d7, for example. And if king f6, this bishop comes back to devastating effect. And black will be mated shortly. So again, there's another example of just a simple classical setup and going into a symmetrical position. And so all I can tell you here again, in symmetrical positions, try to make sure that you can gain an initiative, because that's going to be the only salvation from a draw, basically, is to try to gain an initiative. And of course, if you can create imbalances in the position, that's okay too. Here black helped out by playing this move, bishop takes e6, and this created the double pawns in the center and so on. But the real change came when black played this move, knight e8, and then white was able to start attacking here. This last game I'll show you is between Grandmaster Camille Milton and with the white pieces, and Heinrich Danielson with the black pieces. And this game is interesting because the setup is pretty much the same, but white goes for different plans. So there again is h3, and kind of hindering the scope of this bishop. Bishop d3, queen c7, a4, stopping black's idea of b5. And again, so what you see is a lot of prophylaxis by white, that's maintaining his space advantage, getting his pieces out, but not allowing black to do too much. Now, often in these type of positions, when white takes his time to play moves like h3, a4, this allows black to get his e5 in eventually. So as the last game, black had a problem with developing his c8 bishop. He wound up bringing it to e6, accepting double pawns, etc. In this game, Danielson decides to play b6 and develop it on b7. Queen d2, same as before. Black gets his e5, and so again we have this symmetrical type position. White takes here, and this time black is the one that kind of opts for an imbalance here. Instead of just taking symmetrically, he decides to capture it with the knight. And of course, if white just captured, Then you would just have again a symmetrical position where you would try to gain an initiative. Like this is not bad for white. You would just have to kind of work to make something happen. Again, the idea a5 is in this position. All right, with the rook here, you're already threatening to take here. So again, it's an idea. However, after knight takes e5, Milton decided to play bishop e2. Okay, so what this does is now it exposes this d pawn, and so here's another plan in the position that you can play. So bishop b7, black completes his development of the c8 bishop and connects his rooks. Rook fd1. So you see the obvious buildup against the weak point in the position. Black would love to get rid of that d pawn by advancing it and destroying white's e pawn. Rook a d8. There's our friend, and again a5, bishop c8, a takes, a takes. So now we have the white rook on a1 automatically developed. Bishop g5, initiating the pin on the knight, and also it weakens the possibility of this advance. So rook d7, and now knight d4. b5, and now b4, just fixing those pawns there, right, from advancing and knocking the knight on c3 away from the center. King h8, and now bishop h6, just trading off the bishop. That's a common theme. It's not always necessary in these setups, but it is a common theme to eliminate the fianchettoed bishop. Queen takes h6 is played, and now rook d8, rook d2, rook fe8, rook a d1. Again, notice the constant pressure on the d file. King g8, and now queen g5, just just probing the black position. The knight is unprotected. What are you gonna do? Knight d7, and now beautiful move and plan by white. Knight f5. Again, this is one of the downsides of the fianchetto bishop not being there on g7, is that tactics like this will often arise, and so out of the clear blue we have a triple attack on this pawn. So we saw from the beginning how black gave white the option of going into this type of position where he can attack his d pawn. All right, he probably wanted white to trade, but white didn't trade, and then he was left with a weak pawn on the d file. Rook takes e4, and nice plan here by white. Obviously he foresaw this. So if knight takes e4, just simply knight takes e4, rook takes, knight takes d6 with the attack on the rook. So rook e5 and queen g3, and white is just simply better here all around. So rook, for instance, rook d5, rook takes. Oops, sorry about that. Pawn takes, and rook takes. Queen c2, queen g5 attacking the rook. Rook f8, bishop d3. Just a sample line, and you can see the activity of white here and how black is in serious trouble in this position. So he played rook takes e4 instead, and of course after knight takes e4, white is still better. Knight takes e4 and knight h6, but instead of going into that continuation, that Milton just played knight h6 right away. Check, king f8, and then just rook d6. Devastating move right here. Rook e6, rook takes, f takes, knight g4, The idea behind knight g4 is that if knight takes g4, then just simply bishop takes g4, and let's say rook e8, trying to protect the pawn, knight e4, and again the pieces start flooding in. So knight g4, king g7, and then rook d7 was just super powerful. If knight d7, then queen e7, check, king h8, and then knight f6 with the threat of mate here. So of course, black would have to part with his queen after say like knight f8 or something like that. So the game would be over. So another short game. So that concludes our video on the classical, just some plans in the classical Pirc for white. So you don't always have to go, balls to the wall and trying to blow your opponent off the board, but you can choose like these quiet openings, especially if you're not familiar with the variations in the Pircs, because there are some sharp variations. Basically, it's live by the sword, die by the sword. The sharper you play against your opponent, usually the sharper his attacks and options are. And you might not play against the Pircs that much, and then you go to a tournament or something, somebody plays the Pirc, you might want to be conservative. You can always turn to a setup like this, and whether you play h3, a4, or you leave h3 out and just play bishop e2, etc. It's always going to be pretty much the same setup where you castle, queen d2, you bring the rooks to the center, and after e5 from your opponent, you can go into a completely symmetrical position whereby you seek to gain an initiative. So as long as you remember the principles that are at play, it would be easier for you to navigate, right, without so much memorization. Now, am I promising some huge advantage? Of course not. Okay, but you will have at least know like where to go from here. You won't just be confused about the position, right? Just recognizing that you have more space, you have two pawns in the center, and you have a decent position is enough, and should give you confidence that you do have winning chances, especially by me showing you 3 games that ended in less than 30 moves here. So I suggest you check out the video a few times and go over the plans and try to implement them in your games and see how it goes. Alright, so that concludes the video on the classical Pirc. Please donate to my channel by checking the links below. Please like, subscribe, comment. If there's any openings that you want me to go over, just let me know in the comment section and I will do. Also check the links below for DVD/books, and they'll always be related to the opening that was discussed on the board. So today we talked about the Pirc defense. So there you will find videos down in the links box below. So I'll see you guys on the next video.